My name is Ryan Carter. I'm 35 years old, born and raised in Dallas, Texas. And I'll never forget the night I sat in a glass conference room, pen in hand, signing my name across a contract worth $22 million. The weight of that moment wasn't in the ink on the paper. It was in the memory of the woman who, just a month earlier, had looked me dead in the eye and told me I was too broke to marry. She said it like a verdict. Like my worth as a man began and ended with the size of my bank account. And the worst part? For a split second, I almost believed her. We had been engaged for nearly a year, planning a future together, building a life that I thought was based on love and loyalty. I didn't have millions then. I didn't drive a luxury car or live in a high-rise condo. What I had was a small but growing business, long nights of work, and the kind of determination that doesn't always look impressive until it pays off. But to her, that wasn't enough. "You can't even afford a proper wedding," she spat one evening, holding the engagement ring like it was burning her hand. "I can't marry a man who doesn't know how to provide." She slipped the ring off and left it on the counter. I stood there in silence, my chest hollow, watching the woman I thought I knew walk out the door without looking back. For days, I replayed her words in my head. Too broke to marry, too broke to be worth her time. And each time I heard them, the sting grew sharper. But sitting in that conference room weeks later, I realized something. Her words weren't a verdict. They were fuel. Every hour I'd spent grinding, every rejection, every sleepless night working on deals that fell through. It had all led me here. And now, with one stroke of a pen, my life had changed forever. The executives across the table shook my hand, congratulated me, smiled for the cameras. To them, it was just another contract. To me, it was vindication. Proof that I had been right to believe in myself when she couldn't. And as I walked out of that building, contract folder under my arm, the Dallas skyline blazing against the evening sky, I thought about her. I thought about the moment she dismissed me, the way she laughed when she said I'd never succeed. And I knew she would hear about this. Not because I'd tell her, not because I'd rub it in, but because success that big doesn't stay silent. She left me because she thought I had nothing. A month later, I had 22 million reasons to prove her wrong. When I first met Claire, I thought I'd found everything I'd ever wanted. She was beautiful, ambitious, and carried herself with the kind of confidence that lit up every room she walked into. We met at a friend's barbecue, both of us reaching for the same plate of ribs. She laughed, I cracked some corny joke, and that was it. We clicked. At the time, I was 3 years into building my own construction management firm. It wasn't glamorous. I wasn't rolling in money, but I was building something that mattered. My days started before sunrise, meeting crews on job sites, handling city permits, negotiating with suppliers. I'd come home late, sometimes covered in dust and sweat, too tired to cook. But there was pride in it. Pride in knowing I wasn't punching someone else's clock. I was punching my own. Claire said she admired that about me. She loved telling people I was driven, entrepreneurial. She'd beam when introducing me to her friends. "This is Ryan. He owns his own company." And in those early days, I believed her pride was real. We built memories like any couple does. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market, movie nights on my beat-up couch, long drives out to Lake Ray Hubbard with the windows down. I didn't have much money to spoil her, but I gave her time, attention, loyalty. I thought that mattered more than anything. But slowly, things began to shift. At first, it was little comments, subtle, almost playful. Wouldn't it be nice if we could vacation in Europe like Jenna and her fiancé? Or, Samantha's husband just bought her a new car. Can you believe that? I brushed them off, thinking she was just daydreaming. But over time, the comments sharpened. Ryan, you're always working. But where's the money going? When are we going to stop living like college kids? Don't you want to give me the life I deserve? I tried to explain. Business takes time. Contracts fall through. Deals drag out. Money ebbs and flows. Some months were great. Others were tight. But I believed in what I was building. I believed if I stayed the course, everything would fall into place. She wasn't convinced. Her friends didn't help either. Most of them dated men who worked in finance or tech, guys who drove nice cars and wore expensive watches. When we went out as a group, I felt the weight of the comparisons. Claire would glance at their handbags, their vacations, their engagement rings, and I could see it in her eyes. Envy, dissatisfaction. Still, I kept trying. When I proposed to her, I didn't have the most expensive ring, but it was elegant, chosen with care, and paid for in cash. She cried when I asked, said yes, and for a while I thought we'd beaten the doubts. We started planning a wedding. Something simple, something us. I thought love would carry us through the lean times. But the cracks widened. She started questioning every decision. Why are you putting so much money back into the business? Why don't you just take a stable job instead of gambling on contracts? Each word chipped away at me. What she called gambling, I called investing in my future. Then came the fights. Not loud, screaming matches, but cold, cutting arguments that ended with her storming out of the room. One night after I'd worked a 14-hour day, she looked at me and said, Ryan, I don't want to be married to potential. I want security. Those words hit me harder than any insult. I wasn't asking her to live on hope. I was building something real. But she didn't see it. Or maybe she didn't care. The lowest point came at a dinner with her parents. They were well off, polished. The kind of couple who lived in a gated community with a Mercedes in the driveway. Her father asked about my business, and I explained I was negotiating a major contract, one that could transform everything. He nodded politely, then said, "But until then, you're still small." Claire deserves stability. I caught the way she looked at him. She didn't defend me. She didn't argue. She just stayed quiet. That silence told me everything. From that night forward, something in our relationship changed. She grew colder, more distant. Calls unanswered, texts delayed. She always had an excuse. Work, friends, errands, but I knew. She was slipping away. I kept holding on, trying to show her I was working for us. I skipped nights out with friends, poured every dollar back into the company, kept pushing myself to the brink. I thought, if I just got that one big break, she'd finally see. But instead, she saw only what I lacked. One evening, as we sat in the kitchen going over wedding expenses, she dropped the bomb. "We can't even afford a proper wedding, Ryan. I can't marry a man who doesn't know how to provide." Her voice was sharp, final. She pulled the ring from her finger and set it on the counter. For a moment, I couldn't even move. The air felt heavy, pressing down on me. "Claire," I started, but she cut me off. "No," she said, her eyes cold. "You'll never be successful enough." I can't build a life on maybes, and just like that, she walked away. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at the ring she'd left behind. I thought about the years I'd given her, the sacrifices I'd made, the love I thought was enough. And I realized it had never been enough for her. But deep down, I also realized something else. It wasn't me who was too broke. It was her. Too broken faith, too broken patience, too broken love. And while she walked away, convinced I would never be more than a struggling man, I was weeks away from a deal that would change everything. I always thought heartbreak would come like thunder. Loud, crashing, impossible to ignore. But with Claire, it came like erosion. A slow wearing down. One dismissive word, one cold glance at a time. After she left that ring on the counter, I didn't chase her. I didn't beg. I didn't even call. My chest felt hollow, but my mind was strangely clear. If she believed my worth as a man ended with my bank balance, then she had never really seen me at all. But silence doesn't erase pain. The weeks after she left were some of the loneliest I've ever lived. Every morning, I woke up half expecting a text from her, some apology, some sign she regretted it. Instead, there was nothing. Just the empty spot on the nightstand where her ring box used to sit. I went about my routine like a ghost. Work, home, work again. But beneath the numbness, something else started growing. A suspicion. A tension I couldn't shake. I began replaying our last few months together, all the little moments I had brushed off. And for the first time, I saw them clearly. The way she stopped introducing me as a business owner and started saying I was still figuring things out. The way she rolled her eyes whenever I talked about future contracts. The way she laughed one night when her friend joked, "Ryan's the dreamer. Claire needs a doer." Back then, I thought it was harmless. Now I realized it had been contempt all along. And then came the whispers. Dallas isn't a huge city, not when it comes to social circles. A buddy of mine saw her at a downtown bar with another guy. Tall, suited, the kind who wore wealth like cologne. Someone else mentioned she'd been spending weekends out of town, though she never told me that. The puzzle pieces started clicking into place, and they painted a brutal picture. She wasn't just leaving me. She was upgrading, or at least trying to. That thought burned worse than the breakup itself. It wasn't just that she didn't believe in me. It was that she had already decided I was a failure. I started noticing everything with new eyes. The constant comparisons she'd made to her friends' husbands. The sighs when we'd pass luxury condos in Uptown. The way she'd scroll through Instagram, her expression hardening as she looked at vacations, handbags, lifestyles she thought she deserved. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized Claire hadn't been planning a life with me. She'd been waiting for me to turn into someone else. That realization was like a snap inside me. It didn't make me cry. It didn't make me scream. It made me watch. I started paying attention to how people around me treated me. Friends, family, coworkers. Most didn't mock me outright, but I saw the doubt in their eyes when I talked about chasing big contracts. They smiled politely, the same way people smile at children talking about becoming astronauts. That polite doubt hurt almost as much as Claire's open scorn. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I went quiet. I stopped trying to explain myself. When friends asked about the breakup, I just shrugged. When my parents asked about the business, I gave short answers. I realized words didn't matter anymore. Not to Claire, not to them. Only results would. The tension built day by day. Each time I sat across from someone who didn't believe, I added another invisible stone to the pile I was carrying. Each doubt became fuel. Each laugh became a spark. And the strangest part? Claire's voice never left my head. "You'll never be successful enough." I heard it in the mornings, in the silence of job sites, in the late nights staring at spreadsheets. First it hurt, Then it hardened. I began to whisper back in the dark, "Watch me." The unraveling wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. About realizing that I had spent years fighting for someone else's approval instead of building my own. About realizing that love built on conditions isn't love at all. The phone calls stopped. The texts stopped. But the memory of her walking out stayed sharp. And then, just when the silence felt heaviest, the email landed in my inbox. It was 2:07 a.m. I'd stayed late at the office, going over figures with my CFO, running projections until my eyes blurred. When I finally got home and collapsed onto the couch, my phone buzzed. I glanced down, expecting junk mail. Instead, I saw the subject line, "Contract approval, $22 million, final sign-off." I stared at it, my heart pounding. My hands actually shook as I opened it. And there it was, in black and white. Confirmation from the city, the client, the investors, months of negotiation, of stress, of blood and sweat and sleepless nights. All of it had come together. $22 million. I leaned back, my apartment spinning around me. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then, slowly, a smile spread across my face. Claire had said I was too broke to marry, that I would never be enough. But now, I had something no one could dismiss, no one could laugh at. Not her, not her friends, not even her polished Mercedes-driving parents. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I didn't say a word. Because I knew she'd hear about it. Dallas isn't a huge city. Word travels fast. And when it did, the silence I had carried would finally become my sharpest weapon. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even sleep. I just stared at the numbers and whispered to myself, "Now the real revenge begins." The night she ended it replayed in my head 1,000 times, but one moment stood out sharper than the rest. Not the slam of the door, not the hollow silence afterward. It was the look in her eyes when she said it, the way her lips curled, the way her voice didn't tremble. "You'll never be successful enough. I can't marry a man who can't provide." Those words weren't a fight. They weren't frustration in the heat of the moment. They were a verdict. Cold, rehearsed, final. She had decided who I was, and in that instant, I realized nothing I could say would ever change her mind. For a long time, I sat at that kitchen table after she left, the engagement ring glinting under the dim light. I remember running my thumb over the band, thinking about all the nights I'd spent working instead of sleeping, all the dreams I thought we were building together. And for the first time in years, I felt empty. But emptiness has a strange way of clearing space. The more I replayed her words, the more something inside me shifted. My chest still ached, but my mind sharpened. I thought about every sacrifice I'd made, every late night, every deal I'd fought tooth and nail to close. I thought about how she had dismissed all of it with one sentence. And then came the snap. Not an explosion, not rage, just a clean break inside me, like a bone setting itself back into place. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't even text her to ask why, because I already knew the answer. She hadn't fallen out of love. She had fallen out of patience. She didn't want the man I was. She wanted the man she thought I should already be. That realization hurt less than I expected. In fact, it steadied me. If she couldn't see the value in the man who was building, she didn't deserve to stand beside the man who would one day finish. So I made a decision. From that night forward, I wouldn't waste another ounce of energy trying to convince anyone of my worth. Not her, not her parents, not the friends who whispered behind my back. I would stay silent. I would let the work speak. And when the time came, when the numbers were undeniable, I would let the truth land like a hammer. I remember pushing the ring box into a drawer, shutting it with a firm click. That was the sound of closure. That was the sound of me moving forward. In that moment, I stopped chasing her approval. I stopped craving validation, and I started planning. Because she was wrong. I wasn't too broke to marry. I wasn't too broke to build. I wasn't too broke to succeed. I was just too broke for her vision of success, shallow, immediate, borrowed from someone else's life. And one day soon, I'd prove it without saying a single word. I didn't cry that night. I didn't even sleep. I just whispered to myself, "She'll see." Not through my words, but through the life I'm about to build. After Claire walked out, I thought the pain would crush me. And in some ways, it did. The silence of my apartment was heavier than I'd ever known. Her toothbrush still in the bathroom, her sweater draped across the couch. It was like the ghost of the life I thought we'd have lingered in every corner. But beneath that weight, something else began to take shape. Clarity. For years, I'd been split in two. Half my energy building my business, half trying to prove myself to her family, to anyone who doubted me. That night, when she left, she unknowingly did me a favor. She removed the distraction. Now I was free to focus on one thing, winning. And winning meant strategy. The deal I'd been working on wasn't just another contract. It was the biggest opportunity of my career. A citywide construction project, years in the making, with a payout large enough to change my life forever. But deals like that aren't handed over easily. They're tested, dissected, scrutinized. I knew if I was going to pull it off, I couldn't afford a single misstep. So I got to work. I reorganized my days with military precision. Mornings started at 5 a.m., a run through the quiet Dallas streets. Not for fitness, but for discipline. I needed to feel in control of my body before I tackled the chaos of negotiations. By 6:30, I was at the office, laptop open, coffee in hand. My team thought I was driven before, but now I was relentless. I reviewed contracts until my eyes blurred. I studied market reports, zoning laws, supply chain vulnerabilities. I met with lawyers, accountants, and consultants, sometimes all in the same day. Every question the city or investors might throw at me, I prepared an answer for. Every potential weakness in the plan, I patched before anyone else noticed. But I didn't just prepare paperwork. I prepared myself. Claire's words still echoed in my head, too broke to marry, and every time I heard them, I funneled that sting into discipline. I polished my public speaking. I tailored my wardrobe, not flashy, but sharp, commanding respect in every boardroom I entered. I learned how to hold silence in meetings, to let others squirm while I stayed calm. Because revenge doesn't always come from shouting. Sometimes it comes from being the quietest, most unshakable man in the room. Meanwhile, I said nothing to her. No calls, no texts. I didn't even look at her social media. Let her believe I was crawling back into obscurity. Let her think she'd escaped a failure. That belief would make the truth cut deeper when it finally came out. But I wasn't just planning for revenge. I was planning for life after it. I started building financial foundations beyond the contract, diversifying investments, setting up safety nets, creating structures so that when the money came in, it wouldn't vanish like smoke. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just working for approval. I was working for permanence. There were days when exhaustion nearly broke me. Days when lawyers pushed back, when city officials demanded revisions, when my own team questioned whether we could pull this off. But every time I wanted to quit, I remembered the look on Claire's face when she told me I'd never be enough. That look became fuel. That sentence became my war cry. And slowly, I could feel momentum shifting. Meetings that once felt tense began to feel like victories. Investors nodded more often. City officials asked fewer questions. The contract that had once seemed like a mountain began to look like a summit within reach. I played the long game. I didn't brag, didn't flaunt progress, didn't hint at what was coming. Even when mutual friends asked how I was doing, I kept my answers simple. Keeping busy. Inside, though, I was building an empire brick by brick. And in the quiet moments, when doubt tried to creep in, I reminded myself, she thought I was broke. She thought I was weak. She thought she could walk away and I'd fade into nothing, but she was wrong. I was becoming the kind of man she never had the patience to wait for. By the time the final negotiations began, I was ready. Every scenario rehearsed, every document airtight. My lawyers said they'd never seen a client so prepared. My team said I was different, sharper, colder, more focused. They weren't wrong. I had shed the version of myself who craved approval. I had become something else entirely. The night before the signing, I sat alone in my office, staring at the city skyline through the window. Dallas glittered under the stars, full of people chasing something, and I thought about her, wondering where she was, who she was with, if she was laughing at some other man's jokes while I sat there buried in contracts. And then I smiled, because it didn't matter. The next morning, everything would change. She had left me believing I was too broke to marry. What she didn't know was that I had been quietly preparing the most devastating response a man could give. Not an argument, not a fight, but a contract worth $22 million. She thought I'd never fight back. She thought I'd crumble. But she forgot. Patience and silence aren't weakness. They're weapons. The morning of the signing felt unreal. The city was waking up, but I was already standing in front of a glass tower downtown, contract folder tucked under my arm, the Dallas skyline reflecting off the windows above me. My chest was tight, not with nerves, but with something sharper, anticipation. This was it. Months of negotiations, years of struggle, every ounce of doubt and mockery I had endured, it had all led to this room, this table, this pen. Inside, the conference room buzzed with quiet authority. Lawyers shuffled papers. Investors murmured to one another. Executives leaned back in leather chairs. And me? I sat there steady, dressed sharp, the man nobody in that room would ever call broke. The contract was laid in front of me, page after page of fine print I already knew by heart. My lawyer slid the pen across the table. "When you're ready," he said. I paused for just a moment. I thought about Claire, about the way she had looked at me that night, the disdain in her voice as she told me I'd never be enough. I thought about how she slipped off that ring like it meant nothing, leaving me alone in a kitchen that suddenly felt like a stranger's house. And then I signed. The ink dried quickly, but the weight of it sank deep. $22 million. Not in dreams, not in promises, in writing, in reality. Everyone in the room clapped. Handshakes were exchanged. Champagne glasses clinked. To them, it was another deal closed. To me, it was vindication. It was the sound of every cruel word she'd thrown at me collapsing into silence. When I stepped outside into the Texas sun, the city felt different. The air sharper, the streets brighter. For the first time in years, I walked without the invisible weight of her judgment on my shoulders. I wasn't the man she left anymore. I was the man she'd never have the chance to stand beside again. Word spread faster than I expected. Local business journals picked it up. My company's name trended in industry circles. Investors who once brushed me off suddenly wanted meetings. The kind of people who used to doubt me were now eager to shake my hand. And of course, it reached her. I didn't tell her. I didn't need to. Dallas isn't that big, and 22 million isn't a number that stays hidden. A mutual friend let it slip at a dinner. Did you hear about Ryan? Landed a $22 million contract. Guy's a machine. She laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. Then she saw the article, my name, my company, the deal, all in black and white. I didn't see her face when she read it, but I can imagine it. The shock, the disbelief, the realization that she had walked away just weeks too soon, that she had traded loyalty for short-term comfort, and in doing so, lost everything she thought she wanted. She didn't call. She didn't text. But mutual friends told me she asked about me. Quietly, cautiously. Is he seeing anyone? How's he handling all that success? I smiled when I heard that. She had spent years dismissing me, and now she was fishing for scraps of information like I was some untouchable figure. I didn't reach out. I didn't need to. My silence was louder than any phone call could ever be. The real revenge wasn't rubbing it in her face. It was knowing she'd see my name everywhere and remember the words she threw at me, too broke to marry. And knowing that each time she heard my success mentioned, those words would echo back at her, heavier than ever. Because the truth is, she wasn't wrong. I was broke when we were together. Broke in money, maybe even broke in confidence. But what she didn't see was that broke doesn't mean broken. Broke can be temporary. Weakness can be fuel. And sometimes the man you dismiss as not enough becomes the man you'll spend the rest of your life regretting. At the next family wedding, the shift was undeniable. People who once patted me on the back with pity now pulled me aside with admiration. Ryan, I read about your deal. Impressive stuff. Man, you've built something huge. My parents looked at me differently too, not with doubt, but with quiet pride. For years, I had been the one they worried about. Now I was the one setting an example. And Claire? She was there too. Not as my fiancée, not as my partner, just another guest. We locked eyes across the room for a brief second. She looked away quickly, but not before I saw it. The regret in her face, the recognition, the silent admission that she had thrown away the man I had become. I didn't approach her. I didn't need to. The contract in my pocket, the respect in the room, the weight of what I had built, that was the conversation. The fall wasn't hers, not really. It was the collapse of the image she had created of me. She had painted me as a failure, as a man who would never measure up. And now, in front of everyone, that image shattered. That was the sweetest revenge of all. She left me because she thought I had nothing. A month later, I had 22 million reasons to prove she'd been wrong all along. Time has a way of rewriting stories. A year ago, I was the man Claire left behind, the broke fiancé who, in her eyes, could never measure up. Now, I'm the man who signed a contract worth $22 million. And the strangest part? The money wasn't the real victory. The real victory was realizing I didn't need her, or her approval, to begin with. Life after that contract changed fast. My company grew overnight. New hires, bigger offices, more deals waiting in line. I bought a home of my own. Not a flashy mansion, but a place that felt stable, earned, mine. I helped my parents retire early, invested in projects that created jobs for people who reminded me of my younger self, hungry, overlooked, underestimated. But the biggest change wasn't financial. It was personal. For the first time in years, I felt peace. I no longer carried the weight of trying to prove myself to someone who didn't care. I no longer needed to explain late nights, tight budgets, or sacrifices. I was living on my terms, building not for approval, but for legacy. Claire faded into the background of my story. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask to come back, but she didn't have to. I saw the truth in her silence. Regret is a heavy burden, and I know she carries it. Every article, every mention of my name in business circles, every mutual friend telling her what I've built, it's a reminder of what she walked away from. And maybe, once upon a time, I would have savored that. Maybe I would have wanted to rub it in, to show her what she missed. But now, I don't need to. My life speaks for itself. My revenge isn't in her downfall. It's in my rise. The lesson I've carried from all of this is simple. Love built on conditions isn't love. If someone only believes in you when you've already made it, they were never with you in the first place. Real love, real loyalty, means standing beside someone during the climb, not waiting at the summit to claim the view. Claire didn't fail me by leaving. She freed me. She cut away the weight of her doubt, and in that space, I grew stronger. She thought I was too broke to marry. But the truth is, I was just too broke for her vision of marriage. A vision built on status, money, appearances, not loyalty, not faith. And now, every time I walk into a meeting, every time I look at the life I've built, I carry a quiet reminder. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving someone wrong. It's proving yourself right. She said I was too broke to marry. She was right. I was too broke for her. But never too broke to build a life worth $22 million. If you've ever been underestimated, remember this. Silence and patience are weapons. Don't fight with words. Let your success do the talking. If this story hit home, share it with someone who needs that. Reminder, and if you want more real stories like this, make sure to subscribe. You'll never miss the next one.